Hey everyone, welcome to another Rich Has an Opinion.
So with everything going on in America at the moment, what seems to be screaming out to me is that there's a massive conspiracy to rig the election. Perhaps so, perhaps not. But that got me thinking about other conspiracy theories and how you can tell whether they're BS or not. In my opinion anyway. Let's get into it. So when baking up a conspiracy theory, you need three main ingredients. Number one, a massive batch of the government and the media is lying to you. And you mix that in with the conspirators for better flavour. The conspirators need to be either in shady parts of the government, like the security services, CIA, FBI, MI6, people like that. Or better still, some kind of big corporate conglomeration that are only interested in massive profits, like your oil companies, for example. And then finally, you need why they've done it. Why? That's the bit that makes it believable. That's the topping on the cake. And that's also where it all falls down. Your first ingredient, you can't fault that. You can point that out all day long, every day. There is even stuff going on right now that the media is hiding from us. You can go on to multiple different news websites that are not classed as mainstream media, and you will be seeing things about the election that you are not seeing on the mainstream media. But there you are. I'm not saying it is a conspiracy, but I'm just saying it happens all the time. The mainstream media, the governments, they lie to you. That's their jobs. It's when we start getting into the conspirators. Now, you have just a couple of people involved. That makes it believable. But when you start getting hundreds of people involved, then sooner or later someone's going to slip up and someone's going to start shouting and pointing out this isn't right, because that's human nature. And finally, you need the why. And if that why is not believable, or the why is non-existent, that's where it all falls down. Now, I'm going to pick out a few of the top conspiracy theories out there and tell you how they could be believable or why they're just a load of BS. Right, and in no particular order, this is the first one I'm tackling. The 9/11 towers was an inside job. The theory being that the towers were rigged to explode. The evidence presented for this is the puffs of smoke coming out the side of the building just before the tops of the towers came down. Now, you can claim several reasons why this is BS, but primarily it comes down to ingredient number two, the conspirators. If you've ever seen the inside of an empty building waiting to be demoed, it is unbelievable. There are holes drilled in concrete and steel everywhere with explosives packed inside. There are explosive cables and detonating charges running all around the building. They spend months upon months planning this thing, working the physics out, the exact amounts needed to bring it down. All over. And after months and months of planning, it is, in theory, all goes off in one instant shot. And like I said, cables everywhere. How the hell are you going to hide that much explosives and that many cables in a building that is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but primarily rammed to the gills Monday to Friday, 9 till 5? It doesn't happen. Too many people would have said, what's these cables? So that's why that one's BS. And there is a simple explanation for those puffs of smoke coming out. Basically, when they built it, the steel girders that came from the central core of the building, where all the elevators are, out to the edge of each level, the girders were not bolted in on the outer edges. They just rested on the lip. And the girders were then covered in a flame retardant material. The reason being is steel melts at round about 1500 degrees Celsius. But aircraft fuel burns at round about 1000 degrees Celsius. So how could it melt them? Well, simple. When the aircraft hit the building, the sheer power of the explosion ripped all the flame retardant material off. Now, although steel melts at 1500 degrees, at round about 750 degrees, it loses half its structural integrity. At this point, it has the weight of an entire office floor, plus a burning aircraft, and it's trying to hold it up on a beam that is not bolted in. So that floor collapsed down to the next one, causing a little puff of smoke where the air was compressed. Now the next floor down, which has also suffered some damage, is now trying to hold up 2 burning floors and an aircraft, and has lost some of its structural integrity. So that one falls. The next one is now holding up 3 floors. It wasn't designed for 3 floors, it was designed for 1, let alone 3 on fire and a burning aircraft. So that one fell down to the next floor, and so on and so forth. And with the inside core of the building entirely falling away, the rest of it imploded. The architects who built it said it was horrible to see. We never wanted it to happen. But there are things that have to be built into buildings just in case something like this happens. And the architects openly said that it collapsed the way it was supposed to in the case of something like this should happen. So one of the worst terrorist attacks ever, that should have never happened, but unfortunately did, resulting in a building collapsing the way it was designed to when it never should. My heart goes out to anybody who was involved and is still affected by that, and I do mean that sincerely. But at the end of the day, 9/11 Towers was never an inside job, and the only people who are permeating lies like that are idiots who have no faith at all in their own country. Theory number 2 is the chemtrail theory. This theory being that the aircraft you see in the sky, the trails being left behind, are actually chemicals being dumped on the population. The idea of these chemicals is to reduce our intelligence, so we don't ask questions, we can't think for ourselves, we don't progress, we just do as we're told. So ingredient number 3, the why, is where this falls down. Why would any country in the world want to dumb down the intelligence of their population? What makes a good, strong economy is happy, well-educated workers. And how are you going to get well-educated workers if you're pumping them full of chemicals to suppress their intelligence and their ability to think? Unless you're in a country like North Korea, no, they don't exist. And secondly, there's an element of number 2 in this. How many airports around the world are there where these people must be paid to refill the tanks, and the alleged claim that pilots get paid millions of dollars per flight just to dump these chemicals? Really? Obviously you don't know many pilots. Number 3, the moon landing was a hoax. The main evidence they have for this is the flag is flying. Really? On the photograph I'm looking at, you can actually see the stick across the top holding it. And they starched the flag, but then they had to fold it up and put it in the shuttle, and then from there they had to transfer it to the lander module, which wasn't very big at all. And also, where was all the gas clouds from the lander module? This is not a sci-fi film. The lander module just pointed itself at the moon, fired a little bit of thrust and let gravity do the rest. It didn't have to use its engines to stop it dead and touch down. It just landed. It only needed its engines to take back off again. The reason the flag looks like that, even though you can see it's on an upside down L-shaped flagpole, is it got crumpled to hell. Simple as that. So yeah, so again this one falls down on ingredient number 2, conspirators. How many people were involved in putting that rocket up there? One of them sooner or later would have gone, yeah, we didn't actually do that. And likewise, the US was in a race with the Russians during a massive Cold War. If the Americans never got there, the Russians would have been jumping all over it, saying it's lies, they never got there, we were the first. Because remember, the Russians were the first to space with an animal, the first to space with an astronaut, the first to do a space war. In fact, they were the first to do everything in space except land on the moon. So number 4, Roswell, 1947. Some kind of strange aircraft crashes. The first people on site are members of a nearby military base and the local sheriff's department, and what they find is parts of wreckage of some kind of aircraft they've never seen before. The first thing they do is claim it was a flying saucer, a UFO, because it is an unidentified flying object. They have no idea what it is. Within 12 hours, the military has come out, they've collected everything they can, and they've published a thing saying it was a weather balloon. But no, the theory behind this, it was actually an alien ship that crash landed, and they have then taken it inside and started deconstructing it and retroing all the technology, which is where we got things like the iPod from, microwave cookers, the list goes on. It gets fascinating. In fact, it gets more hilarious the deeper you go into it. But now, this is number 3 ingredient, the why. The why being, it's an advanced alien species that managed to fly all the way across the galaxy from their planet to ours, only to crash when they got here. Now, wouldn't happen. Let's face it, what's going on with all modern time warfare and even rescue situations, the first things first that goes in is the drones, the robots. So if they could make it all the way from another planet to here, they wouldn't come down in person. They'd send the robots in first to make sure it was safe. So yeah, number 3 is where this one falls down. Don't get me wrong, it would be pretty cool if the Americans really did have aliens, but all this was a test plane, because all the way back in then they were even testing the flying wing design, which later on became the B-2 stealth bomber. Number 5, Princess Diana was murdered, and the reason why she was murdered is she was pregnant with the baby of Dodi Al-Fayed. Now, why would the British monarchy murder her because of that? Well, if she gave birth to him, it would then mean that a Muslim child basically has blood connections to the throne, which means that somewhere along the lines that person is along the line to the throne. Seems a bit of a grasping at straws on this one, so it's got to be flavour number 3. Far too out there in the fact that somebody who's 100 and something down the list of line to be next in line for the throne is murdered before they're even born. Just seems a bit too far out for me. Now, I know personal incredulity is not a valid argument, facts over feelings, but I struggle to believe this one, and the fact that the official line of the driver was just going too fast and drunk does make more sense to me. Next, it wasn't the Titanic that sunk. Yep, stick with me on this one. Now, Titanic was not the first of a line, she was actually the second of 3 ships. The first ship was the Britannia, then there was the Titanic, then there was the Olympia. The Britannia was actually struck by a British Navy ramming vessel which did severe damage to her. She had to then limp back to her home dock. In fact, no, she was taken to Southampton first, patched up, then limped back to Ireland where she was given major repairs. Now, all the time while she was in the dock, she wasn't making any money, and the company involved had already invested millions and needed to pay it back. Titanic was still being built at this point. The insurance company sided with the British Navy, saying that the Britannia was at fault, or the Britannic, whichever one it was, and it was therefore written off as a write-off, so she was no longer insurable. Titanic still was, but Titanic wasn't even half built. So the theory is that some of the parts from Titanic were then shifted over onto Britannia. Britannia was patched up, renamed the Titanic, and sent out. The renamed Titanic, which officially is classed as a wreck and uninsurable, is now insured as the Titanic. The original Titanic is continued to be built, named the Britannia, who is uninsurable but continues to go out and work, and then eventually the third one is built, but before she even goes into passenger service she's actually commissioned by the British government and turned into a hospital ship, who ironically enough was sunk by a German submarine off the coast of Gibraltar. The theory being that the Titanic, the Britannia as it actually is, masquerading as the Titanic, is steaming over the Atlantic, but can no longer get up to full speed because of the damage done to its engines by the ramming ship. That's only been partially patched up. Didn't have enough speed to outrun the iceberg. The iceberg hits in the same point where the ramming ship had hit, which was already weakened, causing more damage than it should. Subsequently, she floods and sinks. Ironically, her sister ship, the Olympia, who was taken as a hospital ship by the government, was hit in roughly the same spot with a torpedo and went down exactly the same way. So they weren't that unsinkable after all. The only difference is, as Olympia went down, she was 800 meters long but only went down in 300 meters of water. So her bow went down, hit the deck of the sea, and then it all gently floated down onto one, then rolled onto its side rather than breaking in half like the Titanic did. But again, this is a theory I could get behind. Some big company has taken out lots of loans, needs to start paying them back by having their ships making money, and then one of them gets hit by a ramming ship, so they go into panic mode and instantly start transferring pieces over and doing a bit of insurance fraud. In reality, it falls down on point number 2. Somebody in the dockyard would have gone to the insurance companies and gone, "Excuse me, if you pay me some money, I can tell you what's actually happened." But no, this one has unfortunately been debunked, but it's one I could believe in. But falls down on flavour number 2, the conspirators. But the flavour number 3, the reason why, is believable. And finally, for one that is utter BS, and the reason you can tell it's utter BS is it doesn't even have a flavour 3. Flavour 3 being the reason why. This conspiracy being, the Earth is flat. Now you ask any flat earther out there, okay, why? Why are the governments lying to us? They can't answer the question, and that's how you know it's bull. The reason this is bull, or the reason this conspiracy came about, is these people are unable to see any kind of curve on the Earth. So because they can't see it, therefore it doesn't exist. Forget the fact that the Earth is that massive they can't see it. It's just beyond their comprehension. Again, personal incredulity. Just because you don't believe something doesn't mean to say it's not true. But in this case, it goes to the point where they even make up their own science about physics. According to flat earthers, gravity doesn't even exist. But that's it anyway. And a final one. Atlantis. Does it exist? Well, I heard an interesting theory on why it does. And if it does, I know exactly where it is. But I think I'll save that for another video.